You are listening to the Overwatch League Network, the podcast with Deadeye on all the Overwatch League news and information. The show with Tactical Visor on the statistics and analysis. Here are your hosts, Totally Drunk, Spider, and Slambo.
What is up, guys, and welcome back to Overwatch League Network, the podcast with Deadeye on all the latest Overwatch League news, information, and esports analysis. I am your host, Really Drunk, and tonight we have episode 109. We, of course, will be taking a look at the most recent offseason moves of the Overwatch League before we continue our host rankings for the 2020 season. Now, on our last episode, we went through the bottom 5 teams. So we went through teams that we have ranked between 20 and 16. So tonight, we'll go into that next 5 blocks. So we'll be covering the teams that we have ranked between 15th and 11th. Now, before we get into the news and introduce you to my co-host, I just want to take a moment to thank everyone who is joining us tonight on Twitch for our live show. And of course, I have to thank all of our repeat listeners. So once again, we do have the full crew here tonight. So first off, Nura, welcome back. How has this past week been treating you?
It's been a good week. I watched 1917 yesterday. That was an amazing movie. And I started school, so I've been taking classes. Hasn't been as fun, but it's been a good week so far.
Yeah, I actually saw Underwater. That was my choice this week, which is actually pretty good, but it didn't do so well because, Fox decided not to advertise it, kind of like in similar vein to what they did with Dark Phoenix at the time. But that was definitely right up my alley. If you like movies like The Abyss or Deep Star 6, I highly recommend you guys checking it out. But I've heard nothing but good things about 1917, nonetheless, on that front. But joining me again, as always, is my other co-host, Booger. Booger, how are you doing tonight?
Doing pretty good. I didn't watch any movies this weekend, but I made tortilla chips earlier, so I think that's pretty good. It was pretty fun. So started my week off with a really great crunch, and now I'm ready to podcast.
Absolutely. So I actually started tonight by doing some competitive placements on my main account. We went 4-1 on stream. We wrapped up like 20, 30 minutes ago. And we went pretty good. We went 4-1. We placed around 2,300. So we're still in gold. We'll see whether or not we can climb in there. But, Booger, you and I are probably going to maybe do some duo queue since you and I are pretty much neck and neck in regards to that.
Right there with us too.
True.
He can join in. Have a whole crew.
All right, well, we're halfway to an actual squad on that front, but we're not here to talk about what's happening in-game. Well, we are, because we are going to cover the patch that will start the Overwatch League 2020 season, which, by the way, guys, is one that is available to play right now on the public test run, but we'll get into that here in just a little bit. Let's see what is going on around the league since our last episode. So to start things off, we have 2 players that have basically moved from the Overwatch League over to their respective academy teams. So we have Taimu, DPS player from The Fuel, actually moving to the Team Envy roster, and we also have Toronto Defiant DPS Mangachu having moved to a 2-way contract, so he'll be joining the Defiant Academy team, which is the Montreal Rebellion. So Taimu is basically stepping away from Dallas Fuel and the Overwatch League. He's basically throwing away guaranteed money on the main roster with this move. He is one of the original Envious members. And that was, dating back to when Team Envy was one of the most dominant Overwatch teams in the world. Not just NA, I'm talking about on a global level. This is a team that basically went into Korea during the Apex days, won the championship, which at the time was something that just wasn't done by a team that wasn't Korean. So they were kind of like the standard bearer in the early days of competitive Overwatch. They won Apex Season 1. They, closed down a house at MLG Vegas back in 2016. And, a lot of people might be looking at an opportunity like this to be more of a swan song for someone that has had such a storied career in Overwatch since the game's beta days. Now, with Mangachu, he's going to be joining Tanner and Leaf on the Montreal Rebellion DPS line. And this is actually the second two-way player that this team has under contract, because they also have main support Roki also on a two-way. And, this is like a completely rebuilt roster, as no one that's currently on the team had competed for the Montreal Rebellion in the last season of Contenders. And, I can't say like I'm too surprised, because even dating back, when you look at the Defiant main roster, at the time you basically had 4 DPS listed. You had Logics, you also had the new additions of Agilities and Surefour, and then Mangachu was also there. And, it's hard to really envision too many situations where Mangachu would have gotten the nod in this case. But I'm going to throw it to you. So obviously, we have seen a lot of like these old guard Overwatch players kind of like moving on and transition to other things. So I want to get your thoughts on Taimu just stepping away from the limelight and just trying to play again, because in theory, like, that's what's making him happy. Like, the money is great and all, but he wants to play, and if he was still on this field roster, he would not be given an opportunity to do so, regardless of what role he would be playing on the team.
For Taimu, I think this is a really good addition for him to join Envy. I think Envy is what his name has been mostly connected to over Dallas Fuel. Has been an all right place, but he really popped off on Envy. I think it's really good. I hope they figure out that like more players might want to do this. Maybe Mickey or someone else, AKM maybe, because I don't think any of these players are gonna get play time. I think it's a really good move for these older, I'd say, legacy players to really start popping off again and get their feet under the ground again. And then for Mangachu, I think it's a big move for him because he's still relatively young. I think he has a lot of learning to do, and if he's not going to get playing time on the Defiant roster, it's a smart move for him to try to get playing time wherever else he can. I think another great thing they could do was maybe put Logics on there as well, because I really don't see him getting a lot of playtime over Surefour. But other than that, I think this is just I think it's a smart move by both organizations and both players just to keep their careers going.
I think for Taimu, this kind of like really shows heart that he wants to be a competitor. Like he even said that he could have stayed and made more money just riding the bench for the fuel, but he wants to win and prove himself. And I think that's like really good, and it's showing like a new mindset, and that's that's what winning's all about. And now Mangachu, he you know he didn't really play a whole lot in the league anyway, so they might need him more down on as a two-way player. I definitely think with some of the moves Toronto's made that he wouldn't be getting any time. So it's kind of like, what's more valuable, playtime or riding on the bench and making more money? So it just makes sense. I think there's probably a lot more players that will be doing this moving forward. That, as you can't stay pro forever. So as people decide to drop out of the league, it should be a reasonable opportunity for them to seek, I think.
Yeah, and it's important to note too on this front, it's kind of been a combination of, Overwatch League teams looking to ensure that someone is going to get playtime, even if it is at the tier 2 level. It is, someone just trying to get their confidence back in some ways with Taimu, because obviously his confidence probably has taken a pretty hefty hit since he hasn't been playing on, the Dallas Fuel roster. But then you also have, young talent also like Flower, for example, who actually stepped back to compete on Runaway in Contenders Korea to try to, kind of regain that momentum and build up that star power again. So we'll see how he's going to do now that he's kind of like shied away from the luxury watch blue core roster out of the Excelsior at this point. So it's been a pretty common trend that we have seen so far this Overwatch League season. And I'm curious to see whether or not that's going to continue as we continue to progress further into the lifespan of, not only these players, but the league in itself. But this is the off season, so it wouldn't be a week without a couple of different moves in regards to roster announcements. So we have two teams that have added some new additions, both of whom we had talked about in our rankings this past week. So we have a new addition for the Paris Eternal, as well as two additions to the Los Angeles Valiant. So the Eternal have added another Frenchman to their roster with the addition of main support FD God, and the signing marks a 5th French player and a 12th player overall on the Eternal roster for this season. So this is someone who is still fairly new in the scene. He started playing professionally in 2018. He was on, a couple of EU teams, probably most notably being HSL Esports, as well as Young and Beautiful, who, were kind of like always mid-table out of EU contenders on that front. So basically, with this sign-in, it gives the Eternal 2 players in every role. So he'll be joining crews at the mate support, and then you also have, your flexible options of Hip and Gray. And the Eternal have basically gone out and got an entirely European support core. So I would imagine that means they're going to stick with the English comms on that front. And then you also have the LA Valiant, who are kind of like swooping in. They changed up their colors to like blue and yellow. And there's been a lot of people on both sides of the fence on that front. That one doesn't look as good as some of the other rebrands or recolorization that we have seen from some of the other teams, like, the Shock or the Mayhem in this case as well. But yeah, the Valiant add in XL2 Academy main tank Gig, as well as main support player Rain. Now, Rain, we basically already knew was on the roster. It was leaked on the Overwatch League website way back when. So everyone get your Shocked Pikachu face ready on that front. But this does give the Valiant a second main tank option outside of Dreamer, who they'd also picked up from the Sydney Drop Bears over the offseason. So that sign-in brings the Valiant up to a 9-man roster. There's still rumors about KSP potentially joining the team, but nothing official on that front. So I want to kind of reflect on our thoughts on these teams as a whole, and whether or not these additional sign-ins are going to impact our viewpoint on where we would place them in our rankings. So, Booger, I'm going to start it with you. Do you feel like either one of these are impactful enough to bump a team up a couple of spots?
Not really, to be honest. I still think Valiant stays bottom of the league. They would need an absolutely insane signing to take them out of the bottom 5. And Eternal, it adds a little bit more depth. They've got quite a few youngsters on their roster, so I don't want to use stereotypes or anything, but with such a young roster, they might not be super reliable. So anywhere to bring in depth is really good for them, but I don't think it really bumps up their power rankings too much.
For me, honestly, I don't think it's gonna bump up their power rankings. Maybe Rain because he's their only main support. But other than that, I think that they're not gonna boost it. I think FD God's gonna be a really good scrim partner. It should help the team. And then I think Gig is gonna be one of those people that would sell more jerseys than get wins for the team. I think he's an explosive player who can show a lot to Valiant and show that they have personality on that team. I'm excited to see him off the field more than on the field, but his play I have no questions, he's going to be an all right main tank for the team. But other than that, I think he's just going to be really good off the field.
So there was one other addition that we saw that was actually announced a little bit earlier. I can't remember if it was today or yesterday. It was one of the two. But it was for the Seoul Dynasty, who have continued to acquire pieces of the former London Spitfire roster. So Dynasty, they went out and they added flex support Bedosian to their lineup. So he'll reunite with former Spitfire teammates Gesture and Prophet. So basically what this means is the Dynasty are going to have another flex support option on this team for 2020. The other option was someone that they had promoted from their academy team, Genji Esports, that being Creative. And he was promoted back in October. So Dynasty right now, they have 9 players on their roster, and there's only one person that remains from the inaugural season roster. So you have poor Toby over here being the sole survivor at this point from the Lunatic High heyday. So we'll see how that is going to do on that front. But, I look at this and, you still look at Seoul as being the only team based in Korea. So that alone sets such high expectations on them. And, this is a team that saw improvement from the inaugural season going into this past season. They went from a team that couldn't make the playoffs entirely to a team that was able to qualify through the play-in tournament, but ultimately fell short this past season. So I guess at the end of the day, the big question about this restructure of the Seoul Dynasty is whether or not we feel like the London Spitfires' past issues are going to trickle their way into the Dynasty infrastructure, knowing that London decided to blow up their roster and completely rebuild it after they weren't able to quite match what they were able to do with their run in the inaugural season. So what are your guys' thoughts on this? So we basically have 3 pieces out of that former championship caliber roster, which last season was fairly middle of the pack and had a lot of ups and downs kind of like throughout the season. So Nerd, like, how are you feeling about the Dynasty? Because this is a team in particular that I've noticed has kind of been placed anywhere from like a top 6 team to people feeling like they have the potential to even drop into the bottom 5.
For me, I think Seoul Dynasty is going to hit 7th or 8th, solely for the reason that Seoul Dynasty was 8th last season and London Spitfire was 7th. That's really the only reason I have them there, because it's basically both of the teams combined. I don't see much change. I still think it's going to be a disappointing season for the Dynasty. Top 5 is not anywhere near where I'm going to put them.
I think that's actually a pretty big pickup for the Dynasty. They kind of looked at what seemed to be one of their weak positions and picked someone up that already has chemistry with their team. I think that the Dynasty, this is probably going to definitely be their best year so far in the league, just because, they haven't finished so hot the past 2 years, and they really have legit championship caliber players on their team. And I'm almost wondering if, seeing the contrast in London between season 1 and season 2, if there was something about the atmosphere there and that it could be a big way to bring up some of those players by getting them on the other teams. And I think going back to Seoul and being like in South Korea is going to be massive for this team. And yeah, I think that they're going to definitely have a pretty good year this year.
Yeah, for me, I think the thing that is holding Seoul back, at least with this current iteration, is the fact that they gave up a lot of star power, and also traded away very promising talent from their academy team. I really feel like if you had Prophet paired with someone like Glister, this could be a championship winning team, but that's not the case, because now we're dealing with, basically Profits as the duo, essentially. And you also have Illicit on that front, who was very up or down at that point. But, I'll deep dive more into Soul once we get into power rankings, just not tonight. Because I do feel like, setting them around where they were last season is probably the most likely, but I do feel like some of these other teams got some more key components upgraded over Soul, so I'm still not quite sure where to put them, but I don't think any of us have them in this 5 block that we are going over on tonight's episode. So it'll be a curious tale, but as Spider said, like they kind of did the fusion dance between the Spitfire as well as the Dynasty on that front. So, of course, it's another week. So not only do we have new talent coming into the league, we also have on-air talent confirming that they are not returning for the 2020 season. So today we got word that both Assembler and Malik will not be returning to the Overwatch League in 2020. Now, we still don't know what this is going to mean for Assembler's casting partner, Hexagrams, who... he'll get like a new partner in regards to a caster duo. Maybe he'll move over to the desk. Now it is worth noting, like he had been doing the Bud Light Happy Hour, which was kind of like a desk-oriented like segment show for the Overwatch League on the Bud Light channel. So seems like a natural transition for him should they go that direction. But it seems like Sebler is planning on going back to casting CSGO, and like the biggest thing for him, based off of the quotes that he gave, was that, he likes to get excited and hyped, but he doesn't want to fake it. And he felt like that was becoming more and more difficult for him when it came to casting Overwatch. And a lot of that kind of just stemmed from the fact that the game has changed so much since the first season of the league that it slowed down the game and just made it a lot harder for him to actually cast it. And, it doesn't quite speak to him anymore at this point. So, I a lot of people have been, like, up and down about Similar. I really didn't have any issues with him. Maybe his game knowledge didn't progress as much as some people would have liked as a caster. But I wouldn't say he was a terrible one by any stretch of the imagination. And, it kind of sucks that we're losing both hosts at this point between... Malik and Puckett, so I don't know who is going to take over that particular role. So I'm really hoping, like the league is coming back in a couple of weeks at this point. We're like 3 weeks out. Hopefully we'll hear some announcements on a number of things, on-air talent being one, where the games are going to get streamed. We don't know what the broadcast deal is right now. Like, we also have the Call of Duty League coming up here in, like, 10 days, if that. Maybe we'll get an announcement around then, because you would imagine whatever streaming platform is probably going to want to have both leagues wherever they end up. But this kind of goes back to like the mass exodus of the on-air talent. So is there anyone in particular that you guys feel like will transition nicely to a new role, whether it is a caster or a new host in regards to, the desk at this point? What are you guys feeling is the direction that we're going to be leaning into for 2020 here?
Okay, earlier I had Sideshow on, and he was surprised he was that they didn't have very many casting duos, how few there would be. So I don't know how many more caster announcements we have, but they definitely have to have a little bit more talent on the desk. I'm excited to listen to Brennan's Sideshow cast, but I think the thing about a really good caster is that it helps you focus on the game more. So as long as they're getting the job done, it seems to be good on that front. And as far as a host, I really have no clue who they're going to bring in for that. They could get someone totally new as opposed to someone that's been there in the past. But we kind of have to see who they choose before we can speculate on that.
For me, I think the host of the desk. I think they're just gonna have one host this year, and then they're gonna have hosts for different homestands, probably based off of what the homestand teams want as in a host. I really do hope they get another casting pair. I think two great people from contenders are Jaws and Leg Day. I think they've been killing it, as well as Avril and Pixie. These two, I always enjoy their cast. I think they're great casters. I hope they at least get a shot or move forward with their careers in some other way if they don't make Overwatch League. But if it looks like it's not going to have a lot more casters, then I really think that we have a solid group right now. With that being said, I really hope Hex moves on to the desk because Hex, I think it would be amazing on the desk. I think he would kill it. I think he's very sassy in a way that I really enjoy. So I'm really hoping that he makes it on the way to the desk.
Yeah, I definitely feel like being on the desk makes him more off the cuff, so to speak. So the reins will be a little bit loosened on that front. So I'm hoping to see him like, I, maybe we'll get a vest, maybe not. I honestly don't know if that's going to happen on that front, but there are plenty of options. I mean, maybe even Zoe takes over as a host in that case, because she is primarily loved across social media across the board at this point. But one thing is for certain with the Overwatch League going into 2020 is all the format changes, and of course, now we know what patch we are going to be playing on, as we have patch 1.44 available to play right now on the public test realm. Now, I do want to note, like, we covered in depth, all the changes on Heroes Never Die, so I'm not going to, like, go over all of the patch notes on that front. Basically, what you need to know is this patch took a look and nerfed Mei, Baptiste, Hanzo, Orisa, and Doomfist, primarily revolving around Immortality Field, Mei's primary fire, Diva boosters, Orisa Fortify, Hanzo Storm, Bow projectile speed, as well as Doomfist uppercut recovery time. Now, with that being said, we've kind of noticed more of a trend here in recent tournaments during the offseason that Baptiste and Zenyatta has been kind of like the primary duo in regards to support. Now, Booger, like, we've been trying to sort out Fantasy Overwatch League power rankings in regards to support players, which has been a chaotic mess trying to figure out who's going to be playing Baptiste, who's going to be playing Zenyatta, or are they going to run double flex support? Are they still going to run a main support on Baptiste? And now all of a sudden, we have this new patch, and we're almost back to square one on that point. So I want to get your thoughts on this. Like, do you feel like these changes to Baptiste are going to open up the support role a lot more moving forward, rather than being kind of pinpointed between 2 or 3 particular heroes at this point?
I think Baptiste is still going to be mega strong. I think still see him super high pick rates because the immortality field, even though it's getting nerfed with its cooldowns and stuff, it's still the effect it has is just huge. Like it rivals Mercy's res, like with like fight changing abilities. So I I think that we're still going to see a ton of BAP, and I don't think that it was a nerf enough to take him all the way out. And I think that we're still going to see plenty of Orisa. If anything, this nerf probably is going to hurt the Doomfist players the most, which kind of seems a little rough because he got nerfed already, and I
Mm-hmm.
didn't think that he was. I didn't think he was way too strong, and it didn't seem like we were seeing a ton of Doomfist play, like at the tournaments and stuff, like the Mayhem Invitational and the Breaking Barriers. We weren't seeing a ton of Doomfist. I don't know why they felt the need to nerf him in that way. So that's really weird to me, and I think that you know, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, but Hanzo will still put out the same damage. It just slowed his projectile speed, so that just means that players are going to have to adapt to the the new projectile speed, and that's not really gonna affect his output, or would it? Would he do less damage because he wouldn't fire as many shots? I don't know. It seems like the Hanzo nerf is more isn't as much of a nerf to what he's going to be able to do, and I think the players will be able to play around that. So I'm really surprised that we're going this long without a new hero. That's the biggest surprise to me. I kind of thought they would slip one in, like a surprise new hero, and be like, hey, surprise guys, y'all get Junker Queen right before the league starts. But that didn't happen. So we're going on like probably the longest stretch in Overwatch without a new hero. So that's very curious. I know they're probably saving them all for Overwatch too, but it still seems like that would have not been the worst thing to do right before the league. But yeah, I think that this patch is not gonna we're not gonna see major shakeups in the meta.
This patch, I agree mostly with Booger, especially the Doomfist. I was really looking forward to see these top tier Doomfists in the Overwatch League, just pull it out and just so fluidly destroy people with the uppercut. Um, and it looks clunky now. I've played it. Doomfist Parkour is dead, which is really sad. They have to redo probably everything about it, and that's one of my favorite game modes as well. Um, but most likely, I don't mind some of them, but the Doomfist one really gets on my nerves. I don't think he needed it. Hanzo one, I can see how pros get mad because I have to learn the projectile speed all over again. I can see Corey being mad because he probably won't his as many 6 shots as he did before. But other than that, I mean, it's just I think it's an all right patch. I just hope they rethink some of them and revert because it's not all sunshine and rainbows. These aren't always good fixes for the teams or for anyone playing Overwatch.
Yeah, in regards to hero releases, I'm looking at the release schedule of what it has been. It's been exactly, as of today, looks like 5 months since Sigma dropped.
Yeah, and usually isn't it like about 3 a
Traditional
year?
3 to 4 months in between stuff. 5 is the longest it has been on that front. So tinfoil hat. Here's my thought process. They're like, okay, guys, everyone flip the F out over Chipsa getting signed to the Overwatch League. We can't just have a streamer coming in, popping off on Doomfist. We're gonna cut his legs out from underneath him, so he just never sees the stage, and then it just calms the masses, right? Now they don't have to deal with him playing on stage and then making the league look bad, and then everyone just forget the fact that they have a streamer on the team, and the fusion can just pop off without anyone, mentioning Chips' name at all throughout the entirety of the season.
I, for one, was excited to see Chippy play. Personally, I really wanted to see him play. I think it'd be hype, maybe in some like non-important games. But with this nerf, I don't see it happening. It's you're out in the open. I don't. As much as like I think it was a little disrespectful to get Chipsa, I do think he's gonna sell some tickets and jerseys. I don't know how many, but with this nerf, I don't think he's gonna get a lot of playtime at all. But it's one of those things where I just think this hurts. I think Jake said it in his stream. He's like, this hurts the upper echelon more than the plebs that probably wanted Doomfist nerfs. I don't think it was the best patch for Doomfist, at least. I think honestly, Rocket Punch does not need to be one shot at all. I don't think no one who actually plays Doomfist uses the Rocket Punch one shot. But on the other side, I think it's just other than that, like the Diva boosters, that's all right. I think she can find her way back in the meta soon. It's a little weird, but I think that's a power creep issue right there. But other than that, it's just I think the Doomfist I don't like it at all. But I think that's all I really have to say about it.
Well, I look forward to just spamming boosters to get to the top of the tower on Lee Shane with Diva now. But outside of that, we'll see how much extra ground she's going to be able to cover on that front. I don't think it's going to be like enough to be like, oh man, Diva's coming back into the meta, guys, calm down, and we're just going to replace Sigma all of a sudden. That's
That'll
not
help her keep
gonna
up
happen.
with some ball. Maybe a new diva ball dive could be a thing because she'll be more able to keep up with some of the crazy ball rollouts. But at least it does kind of make sense because when they made her defense matrix shorter, it kind of gives her a way to bring it to where it needs to be. So you can still get the same effect if you play around it smarter.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of makes sense on that front where it's like, yeah, she has a smaller matrix, but she can bring it right to you easier. So it kind of makes it so that she's more playable, but it makes it like a skill shot instead of just flicking the matrix on over and over again with no cooldown and hoping to get something. Like those days are done. It made it a skill, a skill shot, and I think it's a good way to help improve Diva without making it Diva in every game, no matter what. Again,
Mm-hmm. Now, the only other thing I want to note about this patch that has kind of been brought up is there were some animations about Symmetra teleports where it would kind of be instant when it comes to the placement. We do know that that is in fact a bug. That's not intended, so don't expect any sort of Symmetra shenanery in that regard. As much fun as some of the potential openings could be on that end. So probably not going to be seeing a ton of Symmetra, unfortunately. But we'll see if there are any other bugs that do surface. But, with any PTR build, they are always looking for players and not just people to log in for like 30 minutes and then never touch it again. But, I would imagine, this patch is going to be the one with the Lunar New Year, since that will be the next event. And, that should be rolling out here probably in a couple of weeks at this point. Just in time for the Overwatch League and everything on that end. But let's go ahead, guys. Let's continue our power rankings and move into our main discussion. So tonight, we are covering teams that we've ranked between 15th and 11th. So these are basically teams that we feel like are itching towards the play-in tournament at the end of the season. So that would essentially be, play-in being like 12th, 11th place, essentially. So good chance, there might only be a 1 win, maybe 2 at the most, kind of separating all of these teams that are in the mix. So starting at number 15, I'm gonna start with this one because I know this is a team that we had actually already covered this past week that you guys had placed in the bottom 5. And I'm gonna talk about the Florida Mayhem. Now, I'm not going to re-go over all of the offseason moves because it really doesn't make any sense for us to kind of like double up on that end. But obviously, the new additions were from Runaway. You got Yaki, Gain Jin, and I do want to talk about the head coach that they brought on because they did sign former pro player turned immediate success coach in Kuki, which is not something that we really touched up on this past episode. So, Mayhem, they're entering 2020, complete Miami Vice coloring. They got 3 integral parts of the Runaway roster from this past season where they finished as runner-ups out of Contenders Korea. And they basically kept their tank line in place. So you still got Fate, you got Gargoyle, who, honestly, I would still kind of peg as mid-table in regards to the league. And, I'll admit when it comes to Gargoyle, there's probably a little bit of a perception problem due to how good he looked in Stage 4. And a lot of that kind of just stemmed from Roadhog play. And how viable that's going to be in, the 2020 season kind of remains to be seen. So I have my reservations about his hero pool outside of that hero in particular. Now, when it comes to the DPS, of course, they have Saya Player, they have BQB, and they're bringing in Yaki, who is most prominently known as a projectile player. Now, he has played Hitscan in the past, but that was primarily during the dive days. back when he was playing Tracer. But, you basically had this DPS line on a Mayhem this past season, well, really past 2 seasons, that was kind of like all over the place. And a lot of that kind of stemmed from the fact that BQB, when he entered the league, was known as a Sombra player. And that kind of mirrored the inconsistency of players like, someone like Dante from the Outlaws, who looked pretty good on Sombra, highly touted on that role, tried to flex onto, different DPS heroes, and kind of was underwhelming. Maybe outside of Tracer, being the sole exception in his case. So I'm really expecting Saya player and Yaki to be the DPS mainstays on this team moving forward. And should Sombra arise, then maybe you would slot BQB in on that role in particular. But I really feel like at the end of the day, moving Mineral outside of, the team, Alex off to sink another ship in Boston, which we kind of covered this past week, to bringing in the guy who was big Brandon Custa out of a starting spot at the start of 2019 and led Runaway to all of these accolades in 2019 after completely restructuring on top of that. I really feel better about this team. Now, I will say, like, Gainem Jin coming forward into the Overwatch League, out of Korea, probably top 3. I don't know if you would put him above Alarm. Then again, there's really not too many acquisitions that happened during the offseason that were as highly touted as Alarm in this case. But flex support was another one of the issues on this team. You had Hagopen, who had always kind of been middle of the pack, better fantasy Overwatch League player than he was actual player, in many regards, and Byram never kind of really stood out. So I'm at least glad that they have a new addition to bolster the support line, because, at the end of the day, I think right now maybe the biggest fault is their in-game leader, who, at this point, is Chris. So we'll have to see how that comes together, but they're basically going out. They turn to, one of the marquee teams out of Contenders Korea. And, as I said last week, I really feel like going into 2020, this is going to be the Mayhem's best foot moving forward. But, this is a team that I have at 15th, but I do worry, like, if Yaki doesn't perform and complement Saya player, I could see this team falling into the bottom 5. This was a borderline call for me, and I put him just above some of the other teams on that front. But I want to know who you guys have at number 15. So, Winder, I'm going to throw it to you first. Who do you have, just clawing their way out of bottom 5 at this point?
I had the Chengdu Hunters. Did we speak about Chengdu last
We did not.
Okay, so I get to go over their players. For me, Chengdu Hunters last season was built on playing unpredictable styles during otherwise predictable Goats meta. They kept most of the roster, with the exceptions of Yang Xiaolong, Gary, and Ji Kurin. And their DPS additions leave is actually like a huge pickup for them, and will strengthen their DPS line. But the problem is that the strongest part of that team was their DPS line, and he has a lot of overlapping hero pools with their other star DPS in Jinmu. They're rumored to pick up Adding. I've never heard of him, but he's another main tank. I just hope he's not another GQ Rin. Maybe he can actually give them an actual tank to play. The support line was probably in the top half last year, and support lines, and they're rumored to sign another flex support, Coldest.
Mm-hmm.
I think that their support line will be all right. But their biggest weakness is the off tanks with Elsa and Lake. Elsa really has not impressed me the whole time I've watched him play. I just think he's a really weak part of this team. Late Young, we barely saw him. I think I don't remember seeing him at least. He was benched for Elsa, so I don't know how well he's gonna do. And if they improve that place, I think I'd put him a little bit higher. All this being said, they also lost their head coach and mastermind RUI, who made these personal play styles and their own play styles a thing. And I don't see them going higher than they were last year if they don't have the coach that got them to where they were. And so I can see them going around the 10 to 17 mark, which would be like losing 3 more games than they did last year. Um, they cheese their way up to top 12. I don't see them doing this year.
Okay, I at number had Paris Eternal, and we talked about them last week. And really, I think that Paris could have went 15, 16, 17, no problem. Um, they definitely are not going to be a high ranked team. A lot of they have two players that can't even play at the beginning of the season, but I think there still is a little bit of potential left in Soon. Um, he had he just has that potential to pop off in a fight, but he definitely struggles with consistency. So we'll just have to see what what the Paris Eternal can do at the beginning of this season.
It is worth noting, Booger, that, Hanbin being one of the two that is underage right now is only missing the first 2 games. It's not like a Sparkle situation where he's only eligible to play 12 games at 28. So I just wanted to note that on that front. In regards to the Hunters, I will note that I do have the Hunters in this 5 block. I do peg them a little bit higher. And I'm pretty sure Booger also has them in 11th through 15th as well. So we'll jump more into our thoughts on them here in just a little bit. But let's go ahead and talk about the 14th rig team that we have now. This is probably where we're going to start to maybe differ a little bit. But I'm going to throw it to you first. Who do you have coming in at the 14th spot here?
I have the Toronto Defiant, the Canadian powerhouse themselves. With the Defiant, have we talked about Defiant?
We've not.
Okay, good, because Toronto Defiant, they've improved leaps and bounds from last season. Basically, have a completely different team except for Logix and Mangachu and Rocky. But Mangachu and Roki are two ways, so they really shouldn't factor into this. So their new Canadian star, Sure4, is sure to be consistent as ever this season. But the main problem is the other DPS talent on this team. If Sure4 is in, then you have to play agilities, leaving Logix on the bench again. I don't see Logic ever being played over Sure4. This leaves this pop-off player like Pine just like left on the bench, not ever be able to make big plays for them. And then agilities itself, he's been a mid-tier projectile player for this whole time in the Overwatch League. I haven't seen him in at all. He's always just been like a mid-tier, sometimes pops off, sometimes does his job, sometimes looks just not as good. Kind of hydration style of DPS. But their big concerns kind of come in the tank line. Main tank is Beast, which is he comes from Fusion University. He was really highly regarded coming into the second season. He was supposed to be on Chengdu, but that fell through for him. And ever since then, he's been splitting time with Changzik, which is a really weird thing to be splitting time in a contenders team to becoming a starter for an Overwatch League team is a very awkward place for a player. I personally believe he has a lot of potential, but if he fails, they have no backup for him. And that is really worrisome for me. Nevix is another sort of boomer bust. He was a back under Choi, which is understandable because he's Choi Yoibin, literally probably the best flex tank in the league. But the fact is he hasn't really played for 2 seasons, and we don't know what to expect from his professional play in the Overwatch League compared to other tanks. It's just a big mystery for me. And then the support line for me, it's the most consistent in this team with Krieve and Kellix, but it's also like the most boring for me. They're kind of average. Krieve, he's definitely in the top half of flex supports, but I really think he's overhyped, and I don't see him doing as well as he did last year, just being probably the best player for a middling Valiant team. Not best player. I think Space was still probably the best, but and the DPS did a lot, but he showed a lot for that. And then Kellix is just he's a main support. He's there. He does his job well. He's all right. But the main reason I really have him at 15th is I don't know how well they're going to do under their coach Fefe. He started with Eagle Gaming, who won most of their achievements in the Goats meta, and then he led Paris Eternal back-to-back 3 and 4 stages last year. And it makes you wonder if he can coast past the Goats meta glory that he had. I can see this team going around the 11 to 17 mark. They could definitely go higher or lower than that, though.
Yeah, I will note I also have the Defiant in the 14 slot. Booger, do you differentiate from us on this point?
Yeah, actually, I got Dallas spot. I think that Dallas. Well, we'll go. They added Decay, which was a pretty big pickup, and they added Gamsu as well as Doha. And I think Gamsu's a really good tank, but we really haven't seen Note play anything outside of Diva at a high level. And their support line probably is one of the weaker in the league. So I don't really have I think that Dallas, we're going to see a very similar season to what they had last year. Last year they finished in 15th at 10 and 18, and I would peg them to be about the same this year. I will say that I have Toronto Defiant in at 13, so I was right there with y'all on that one. I think one thing too to mention about Toronto, their tank line is great for fantasy Overwatch. They don't have any backups in their tank lines, so they're good picks. They're going to play all the maps, but they have some high points and some low points. Kareev is a good player and also good for fantasy. I think Toronto is going to be a good team to pull your fantasy players from, but that doesn't always translate to being the best team power ranking wise. I got I think I have them a spot ahead of y'all, mostly based on my confidence in Nevix. I think that he will be a good tank, and he plays a nasty Sigma. He really does. When Sigma come out, he started practicing it, thinking that he would play it in the tournament over Choi, and I think he did play a map or two on Sig, but you would have to be something very, very special to play over Choi Open.
Mm-hmm.
So it's I think that the Defiant will have an improved season over last year, whereas I believe Dallas, they're going to stay about the same.
Yeah, I hope Dallas a little bit higher. But to get back to Defiant, one of the themes during this offseason that kind of disappointed me was releasing gods. Primarily because this is someone that I've been following since the early Overwatch days, and when we talk about marketability, they definitely went in that direction with their signings, but losing gods definitely kind of detracted from that same value. So I was really hoping that he was going to stick around on that front. But I can kind of understand, because you probably would have played him behind Nefix at this point. But at the end of the day, it really just feels like the Definer, you know what, guys, what we tried didn't work. Let's go out, let's sign fan favorites. Let's see if it works. And this is basically a Frankenstein team if I've ever seen one. You basically turn to Beast Halo, who hadn't really seen the main stage at one point, was kind of stuck in contract hell for God knows how long. So he wasn't even a mainstay on Fusion University during different times of his run there. And then, you basically have no backups at either role on the tank line, so that's a lot of pressure to be put on young talent. And I know everyone's hyping up Nefix, but in any other team, would he be a starting off tank? Maybe. I don't know. I think there's probably 5 teams that you could realistically say for sure he'd be a starter, but there are a lot of other teams that do have above average to great off tanks that probably would see playtime over him on that point. But when it comes to this team, I expect them to perform decently. But at the end of the day, I feel like the bigger impact that this team is going to have is not on their actual performance. It's going to be how it's going to affect the fandom around Toronto. Like, I think this is better in regards to getting more butts in the seats for homecomings. I think the jersey sales will go up because of the names on this roster. We'll probably see more donations, more bits on Twitch because of that as well. So on that side of things, I like the Moose, but as an actual team, I have a lot of reservations about how this team is going to do. So I would probably say, like, on the highest end, I wouldn't go higher than 13th. I do not think this will be a play-in team at the end of the season. Basement, probably 17th for me with Toronto. But, you know, I don't know, and part of it is just like, okay, Kellex, you know, he was all right on Uprising. Obviously, there was some inner turmoil there between Kellex and AimGod. So who knows how he's gonna do in this situation? You have Surefour, who can play just about anything, but is he top 5 on anything? No. Like you might not even be able to argue top 10 on multiple heroes either. So it's just like, well, who do you really have that is going to be that carry player on this team?
Well, let's look at it this way. They went 8-20 last year. Do you think they're going to do better than that, or worse, or roughly the same?
I would peg this team, if I had to project them, probably 10-11 wins would be where I would put them. So I think they're going to be higher.
Yeah, I think they'll finish higher as well, but not, you know, drastically higher.
All right, so let's go ahead and let's move into slot number 13. So, Booger, I'm going to throw it to you on that front. Who you got at lucky number 13?
Oh, I had Toronto at 13.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe I should take this one then, since it's one that we've already covered. But, you know, I know, like, the next couple of ones that you and I have are going to be a team that Nur had already mentioned. Because at 13, I actually have Chengdu Hunters, and I know you had them
At 12.
right after this at 12. So in regards to the Hunters, they basically cut dead weight with Yun Zhaolon and Ji Qiren. Now, I know, Anura, you're like, well, there's a little bit of overlap with Leave and Jinmu. And I'm going to say that's not really the case, considering that we've seen Leave basically play 22 heroes in the span of one World Cup. You can't tell me that there's a ton of overlap when he's literally going to come in and play anything on this roster.
Well, everyone overlaps with him.
Yeah, that's kind of a moot point at that point. But basically, this is, you know, as you mentioned, was always the team that was like kind of like off-kilter. And sure, a lot of that might have stemmed from the fact that they have a ball specialist. Maybe you chalk some of them up to the strategies built behind RUI as a head coach. And I don't know how that balances out in the grand scheme of things, but this is a team who, regardless of how average on paper they were always someone that was able to contest. It didn't matter if they were running meta. It didn't matter if they were running off meta. They were always just kind of like in the mix. And I don't think that that is going to change with the addition of Leave, and not really seeing any other like big changes to this roster as a whole. Now, I will say, like, obviously the tank line is still going to be a question. Now, whether or not they're going to get a team who is a Reinhardt and Winston specialist from Taiwan who had competed on LGE Hua kind of remains to be seen. I do think they are going to need more flexibility at the main tank position, but this is also a team who, you know, at the time when we were in GOATS meta, you were like, okay, they're going to run GOATS, and then they're just like, nah, man, we're just going to run 3 DPS and just run with it. And then there were times when you thought they would go DPS, and then they just ran meta, and you're like, well, what the hell's going on? Like, what is this team doing? So maybe part of the success revolved around them being unpredictable. And I don't really see that changing too much in the grand scheme of things. But I feel like Hunters are always going to be this bubble team who are going to be able to upset some of the best teams in the league, but are always just going to kind of be middle of the pack, or at least in the discussion. They might not be a standout team, but you're never not going to name them when it comes to playing potential at this point.
When the ball meta comes, Chengdu will be, top of the pack, practicing that for so long. I think it's they went like a complete different direction. Last year, everybody was running 3-3, and they tried to be the ones that were innovative. And I really like that and respect that about them as a team, but it didn't really produce the results they were hoping for. I see the Hunters last season, they were 13-15. I see them doing a little bit better than that this year, maybe up to 15 wins. They finished in 12th last year, so I actually had them ranked the same as they finished last year. Leave coming in, I think, you know, Shangdu has the opportunity to climb the power rankings super fast if Leave comes in popping off. But if he doesn't come in looking super spectacular, then they're probably going to end up right in the same spot as they were last year.
Right on. And Nurka, who do you have at rank 13?
I have a little favorite of one of our hosts, the Houston Outlaws, at 13th. So Houston Outlaws have shaken up their roster quite a bit. Losing Arhan, probably one of their best players. No, but for real, they lost Arhan, I think, and Bonnie, who's now a coach. But I think their biggest loss this year was probably Jake, who was a really good in-team leader for them. And then they're seeing some pretty interesting additions that I really like. I think adding Blase Hydration to the DPS line, it really bolstered the projectile DPS, which I think they had a good flex. And Jake has always been a consistent. They had really good flex in Dante. I think he's probably their star DPS coming into the league. But Jake was always a consistent projectile, but I think Blase and Hydration really bring it. My main problem with both of those is that they, unlike what you believe that Jimmu and Leaf have, they actually have basically the same hero pool, except Hydration could probably play a few more tanks than Blase. But the my main thing is Linkster's probably still going to be inconsistent, and he's their only hit scan. And I don't see Blase Hydration really popping up as much as other flex DPS. I think they have a solid DPS line now, but I don't see them as like next level. Their addition to Meko really like highly improves their flex tank position. But with Spree and Coolmat just like chilling on their roster, where they could have other players that could really help the team, kind of hurts it. Now, the only time I can see either of these players coming in is Spree on Zarya. But even that's kind of questionable. Leads me to Muma. Muma, he's been a consistent tank for them. I haven't seen him improve in 2 years. I really hope that they bring in a DPS to not DPS main tank to contest with him and really push him and maybe make him better or like let him leave the spot. I don't believe in Muma bringing this team to the next level. Their support line probably has the most improvement for them. Adding Repel and Flex support and Jexe, both being kind of benched a little bit. I mean, Jexe had some starting spots, and I think Repel started for a few games as well, but like them mostly being benched for other players. I really do think they can shine on this team. I think they're both improvements. There's some weird things that could happen with this team that makes me skeptical about them. They're both like any of these players other than Hydration and Blase have not really been on a mixed roster before. And that really hurts this team, I think. And for me at least. And then for me, it's like this team could swim, could go pretty good, win a few games, or they could really sink and because they just don't mesh well as a team. It seems like a mesh. Houston Outlaws have always had this like team synergy going on, and it could really break with these new additions to the team. It's really up to Arsha and how well he puts this team together. I can see them going around the 12 to 13 win for me.
You actually have the Outlaws at 12. I don't know how you're feeling, Booger. Do you have them in the same spot, or you got them higher?
No, I
Okay.
have Outlaws next week. I'll say
Top
I
10,
think-
huh?
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I don't think it's that crazy to say either. I think Linkster is a lot better than what people have given him credit for. I've been actually checking out his streams more lately, and he is popping off with the Hanzo. So
We're talking about
I
ladder.
would, yeah, you're right, but still, it's I would expect, I think the Houston Outlaws have looked at their weak points, and every weak point they have seen, they try to improve upon it. Like clearly I was looking at it thinking Boink was going to be their weak point this year, and then they went and improved even on that. Last year, how many times did we say, oh man, Houston's just a good off tank away from being an elite team? Well, they got a pretty good off tank in Mecco, who has been on a top 3 team since the league started. And they picked up, the Blase and Hydration pickups. I do see some overlap there. And I almost wonder if they picked up one Blase without knowing they get Hydration or vice versa. And that could have led them to that situation. Um, I see them having a pretty rotating DPS lineup. I would think that it would be very map dependent. But I don't think that there's any problem having Muma as main tank. I think having a good solid off tank there with him will definitely help his performance and help the team as a whole. Um, I do understand being skeptical about them, especially with how they finished the past 2 years. But we definitely have seen like glimpse of high points there, and I think that at the very least, the Outlaws going into this season look to be most improved. Maybe. Maybe Soul might be most improved. I'm not sure. We'll have to see how the season pans out. Does that take us to number 12 or 11?
We are at 12 at this point.
Okay, gotcha.
And as I said, I do have the Outlaws here, and I'll be honest, like I've always had reservations about the Texas teams, and I still do. I actually have them very close to one another, and I kept flipping them time and time again, leading up to a recorded night. I still don't know how either one's gonna do. I don't trust either team, and that's like the worst thing, because both of these teams have made some awesome sign-ins, some better than others. Some of them I'm just confused by, because some of them just aren't the same player on the same role, going to be on the same team, and it makes no sense at all to me. So it's been an interesting offseason for Outlaws. At one point, the team was up for sale. Didn't know when funds were going to be made available. Then all of a sudden, they start to announce some sign-ins, and Jake is gone. They don't have their in-game leader. They're going to turn to Jexay at this point, as Drake transitions to a caster. Now, yes, we cut some dead weight. Garn, Arhan, and Bonnie. But you also have, like, a number of players, just like the Dallas Fuel, who are just going to be kind of sitting on a bench the entirety of the season, most notably the other off-tanks outside of Mecco, being, Spree and Coolmat on that front. I'd look at Coolmat, and that's just kind of like a waste of a roster slot at this point. Spree, as mentioned, probably going to play Zarya, if anything, but that seems pretty unlikely. And I'll be honest, I do not think this DPS lineup is that impressive, regardless of who they have in here. You have Hydration, who, outside of Doomfist, I would say has been pretty average at best. He's never really been a standout player on the Gladiators. And you could honestly just say the same thing about Blase. Both of these players fill the same role on this team. Both of them most prominently popped off on Doomfist. Looked okay on Pharah, but outside of that, we're just kind of just there. And I don't understand why he needed both additions to the team when he could have gone out and signed another addition to maybe replace Muma, maybe picking up, Tizzy, or, God forbid, Kaiser, because, he's still not in the Overwatch League for some reason and still on O2 Bless on that point. But I really love the additions at the support line for this team. That was my biggest issue with them. Getting to reunite Jexay and Repel was definitely a smart move. You already have pre-built synergy on that front. And at the end of the day, the big question is, how are the Outlaws going to be able to integrate the Korean talent on this team? And I really do feel like Harsha at the helm is going to make that adjustment period better for them as a whole. But I feel like, you just look at the DPS line, and, Dante, he was known as the Sombra Specialist. He got to play a little bit of Tracer, which addressed one of the past meme problems of this team, outside of off-tank. And he was okay. He had some pop-off moments, but wasn't really fantastic. Linkser was inconsistent, hit or miss, so I don't know what to think of him. So, I don't know who your guy is at DPS on this team. A lot of them have just been middle of the pack, nothing to write home about. But at least their other lines are looking good. So, maybe that's something, maybe not. But, I feel like this is a team that will sneak into the play-ins. I don't think that they're going to have, that underdog upset potential that maybe they have had in years past. But I'm hoping that with the addition of Harsha and this being such a big opportunity for him, that the Outlaws are going to right the ship. I expect them to be a little bit better, but at the end of the day, this is a team who, in many ways, mirrors the other Texas team, except they don't have the DPS prowess and flexibility like a Decay and Doha, in my opinion. But, if Linkser can continue to be a great, counter sniper, I think they'll fare a little bit better on that front.
I will say with Houston, I think that with their DPS line, I think you're gonna see Dante see the least amount of play this season. That he was touted as being very good at Sombra, and I don't see a whole lot of Sombra comps going on moving into this season. And Linkser when they were weak on Tracer in that first season, he really devoted time to get much better at it going into season 2, and then they just didn't need it because there was no Tracer in season 2. So I definitely think that there's a possibility that signing Hydration Blase could have been to use one of them as trade bait, even though it's not super strong. I'm right there with you. I don't understand. That does seem like there is way too much overlap between those two players, and it makes me wonder how they want to address that.
Yeah, the only situation where it could come into play is if it was double projectile when it was Pharah Doomfist, which we have seen in the past, but there's a Doomfist nerf on PTR, so we're gonna roll that out.
Give me hydration on main tank. give me on Orisa. Something else. I want to see something fresh. I think Harsha has a lot on his plate. I do really like him. I think he's a big upgrade from their previous head coach. So if this team does really well, it's going to be based off their coaching for me.
Well, do you guys feel like, obviously Jexay's coming in as an in-game leader. How do you guys feel about turning to a new addition to take over that role over someone that had already been previously established on this roster? Is that a high-risk move, do you guys feel like?
I think that a lot of the Outlaws' leadership so far was through Jake. And while Jake had the leadership skills, I don't know if he quite measured up when it comes to raw skill in the game. So having the fact that who was their leader before is not on the team anymore, to have a new leader come in, I don't think that they have the risk of having that friction between like an old captain versus new captain, because that was one of the criticisms of the Outlaws last year, is that they lacked leadership, specifically when Jake wasn't in the lineup, and that brought them to need to put him in the lineup, even when there were, maybe better options from the raw skill perspective. So I think having someone like Jexe is absolutely excellent, and I think that they'll fit well with the team. And what yeah, I think that bringing him in to be a team leader is a great idea, especially with the established synergy he already has with Repel. So I think that it was just all around a good move.
Before Jexe, I really thought the team leader. I think he's a strong leader. He might. I don't think he's as skilled on some of the heroes, hydration, but I feel like he could bring vocal call outs more than hydration. I think he can bring a lot more leadership in that way. But I can kind of see a split between maybe Jexe for most of the Koreans, and then Blase for most of the Western people until they can merge properly as a team. But I think I think it was probably one of their best pickups they've ever done in their whole in their whole career as a team in the Overwatch League.
Yeah, I'm just noting, Spider mentioning that Pharaoh Hanzo has been popular in the recent tourneys, but that could change with the Hanzo nerf. Yeah, Hanzo Farah, maybe could be a good meta choice for the Outlaws in this case, given who they have at DPS. But outside of that, I'm calling it more into question. But that's definitely a potential to be a standout moment for this team. But they've always kind of just relied on that grit that they have always had since the inaugural season, and I don't know whether the culmination of the players that they have now are going to be able to match the same sort of capabilities in that regard. So that's my 12th. Booger, I know you mentioned you had the Hunters already,
12.
and we already kind of talked about that. So, Anur, who do you have at the number 12 spot?
I have the Dallas Fuel. Um, so I'm gonna go through the negatives and positives for this team. Um, I think the one thing that's hurting Dallas Fuel itself is probably themselves. The long contracts will be the death of this team. They keep Harry Hook, Mickey, even AKM now. Um, even though they most likely will see little to no play time this season. These are three spots that could easily be filled with talent that could help this team become competitive. Their coach Arrow hasn't impressed in the Overwatch League at all. And I wouldn't be surprised if halfway through the season, if they don't perform the way they want, I could see him getting booted off and then having to rush to find someone else to fill in for him. Um, Note has a lot of question marks on flex tank heroes that don't rhyme with Biva. And he really has to prove what he can do in other flex tank positions before I believe in him. Honestly, he looks like a diva one trick, and I don't know how well it's going to do with the new metas that are coming out. The support line, although consistent, I don't think they're a championship support line at all. I think Unko being consistently average to above average throughout his play, and I think Closer just has not impressed me with any of his play, especially after being benched during London Spitfire's championship run. Um, with all that being said, Decay and Doha are coming to Dallas Fuel, and you should be hyped. I think these two are going to be huge, a really good DPS duo. I think Doha will show his range of DPS characters. And I really think Zachary's probably going to be the one filling in for third DPS. Maybe ACAM sometimes, but I think it's mostly going to be Zachary. And Zachary gets a lot of hate for a lot of reasons, but I really think he'd be a solid backup for this team. But my highest part about this was Gamsu. I think Gamsu is going to be a huge part of this team. I think they lacked a solid leader in this team for a while. They always talk about how Mickey's like so positive for the team and helps the team, but he's not a leader because he's not in game. I think Gamsu would bring a positive leadership to this team that they really haven't had before. I think OGE is a solid mechanical player, but I don't think he leads the way that Dallas needed. And I think Gamsu is really going to fill that. And the main reason I have them at 12th is they have 5 homestands this year. And Dallas is going to go nuts. I really think the crowd's going to come into play for these games and really boost them to a point where they need to be. So that's why I have them at 12th. I can see them easily falling just because of Dallas reasons, because they're Dallas Fuel. But other than that, I think this team could really do well.
Yeah, we'll note actually Fuel at the 11 spot. So not too far off from the Outlaws in either case for us on that point. So, for me, I look at this team, and again, like, I question the infrastructure of this team. Everyone looks at Dallas as initially, having a ton of fan favorites, and then they kind of shit the bed. And then they, turn to some notable names from Fusion Uni at the time. Everyone's hyping up Arrow, and then still little to no success. And now we have, Mickey the Reporter. They have all these long contracts. 4 or 5 players on this roster probably aren't even going to see the stage unless it's like a 1v1 situation, and even that is a bit of a stretch this season. And honestly, the biggest get, bar none, outside of the K, outside of Gamsu, outside of Doha, is Gamzu's dog. That is the best addition to this team. That is going to be what pushes them potentially up to damn near middle of the pack at the 11th spot for me. Now, I will say, like, they're relying on the Season 1 Uprising tank duo. I like that we're seeing the pairing of Gamzu and Note again. But, as you noted, like, we do need to see more outside of just D.Va from Note, because everything else has kind of been kind of lackluster. And honestly, like, that's kind of been something that has plagued a multitude of flex supports in the Overwatch League that are starters this season. Now, I will admit, like, this is probably the only time I have ever been excited about the Dallas Fuel. And that is with the DPS line, with the additions of the K and Doha. And I'll admit, guys, to K this past season, he had the bid-in war. There was a lot of hype behind him. He did not deliver. That was on the Gladiators, who were an above-average team, always in contention, always top 8, very consistent, and now he's turned into a mid-table team who has more times than not been kind of like near the bottom, echelon of the Overwatch League. But you have Doha, who has essentially been this complimentary DPS who has just picked up shit as he goes at a pretty high level. Yes, at one point he was a Sombra one-trick. That is true. That was partially because they were running a ton of Sombra and Doomfist on Element Mystic. But you know what? He could also play Doomfist when Sparkle had to go over to Pharah. Everything that this kid has moved to in order to complement the better DPS partner. Not to say that he's a bad DPS, because he's not. He is above average. He's just slotted in and been able to be above average. And that's more than you could say a lot about a ton of secondary DPS options in the Overwatch League. So I'm pretty excited about this. So I really feel like for the first time, they have flexibility at DPS, and not just like, oh, I guess we're just going to run AKM on 76 for no reason, or meme and just run him on projectile for whatever reason. I don't know. But much like the Outlaws, I look at these teams, and there is distinctive dead weight, and a lot of that is due to the talent contracts, and that can't be understated. So I feel like the results of the Fuel are going to boil down to basically, having better synergy, on the tank line compared to what they have had in the past. Gamzu as a whole really breathed a lot of life into the Shanghai Dragons this past season, and I think he can actually mirror that with the Dallas Fuel. And you have that A potential out of your starting DPS players, which again will be Doha and K at this point. Support line, kind of middle of the pack. I will agree with you on that front, but I really feel like if the field are going to make a run in regards to playing potential, this is going to be the year to do it. But man, is it hard to find confidence in either Texas team right now, knowing the amount of failures that both of them have faced in years past. So hopefully the raw talent with the new additions are going to be enough to overturn what has been basically a failing team infrastructure since day number one. I'm hoping that's going to be the case, but who knows? Like, I feel like for the Outlaws and the Field, these are teams that have plenty of potential, but both of them could probably fall as low as like 15th or 16th. And that's a scary thought because there are a lot of times where there's internal struggles and the whole Dallas versus Fuel shenanery that goes on. That's a meme, but it actually exists, guys, and hopefully that's gone at this point.
Yeah, but these over the off season, I think that Dallas has made improvements, but I don't think they're gonna finish massively improved over last season. Whereas I think the Outlaws have made enough improvements to finish way better. But them finishing way better, they finished pretty low last year. You know,
Mhm.
Dallas had 10 wins last year, 10 and 18, and I could see them picking up 12 or 14 wins this season. Whereas I think the Outlaws will be positive win record. Um, but then I guess that leaves us just with 11th, right?
Yep.
My 11th is actually one we did talk about last week with the Washington Justice. Um, I think that the Justice have the potential to beat or to lose to any team in the entire league. They could beat anybody or they could lose to anybody. Um, Corey is a massive DPS carry, and I think that he brings. I think their DPS line is enough to keep them out of the bottom couple spots. With their tank line is massively in question, so that's kind of what keeps them from being higher in my book. Who do y'all have at 11?
Well, I already went through mine, so let's throw this to
Oh,
Anura.
my bad.
I have no one's talked about the Washington Justice as the number 11, just like you. So this team, I really feel like it's probably my. I think I said some other team was my biggest risk. This is the biggest risk. I changed my mind. I think Washington could really go anyway. So Washington Justice was horrendous last year during GOATS and really had questionable coaching throughout last year. But stage 4 they really went 6-1 under the guidance of Corey's Hanzo and Stratus's May. They made some big changes. They've improved their flex support with Aim God over the previous two of Sleepy and Guido. They kept Arc. I think Arc was a solid main support and a really good leader for the team. My main question is really how well their tank line do. With Elivote and Locious, I don't know. We don't know. They did well in MV and their previous teams, but those all contenders, and they haven't really had really competitive plays in a while. And then the addition of Roar, it's like Roar was a really mediocre tank for Gladiators. I feel like he was the weakest link on the team. Um, and that's a lot of worry for me. So it's just like this leads into their DPS basically, where it's just like Corey will pop off if he's on the heroes he needs to be. Um, Stratus and Tuba really just need to pick up the slack from there. I think Stratus had amazing showing on May. I think he showed that he's a really good May. But his other projectiles left some room to be really like wanted. I feel like he could really improve next year. I still think he's young and he could really help the team, but we don't know how far he's going to do it, how well he's going to do as a projectile. And then Tuba, for me at least, is a very like legit unknown. I know he was looked at season 2 a little bit by some analysts, but other than that, I haven't heard a lot from people. I heard Tuba. Some people really like him. Some people are like he's all right. So it's one of those. He could have a lackluster, or he can be a surprise, really good projectile for me. My main worry if it hits a double hit scan meta or like a double projectile meta, I don't see any way where the two projectile players can play a hit scan, or they could play without Corey and still like win the games as much as they would previously. Also, their head coach John Galt is a big mystery. But the main reason I have them up here is much like the Dallas Fuel, they have 5 homestands and the lowest amount of travel, which I think will help them tremendously. And this team, I think this team's going to be really well coached because of that. That's the main reason I have them at 11.
So obviously, I talked about the Justice last week. And this is a boomer bust team, and I will use this as a blanket statement primarily because it does revolve around the tank duo that we have. You look at most of the European talent that has come into the Overwatch League, right? Whether it is coaches, whether it is tank players, any player really. And there's maybe only been like one or two that have maybe been standout players. And it's really hard for me to believe that a rookie tank line who have basically just been pretty much sitting idle, haven't seen the stage an entire season, are going to be the answer to propel this team and move them away from, as I mentioned, like the honeymoon phase of this team in particular. Now, am I underrated them? Possibly. But a lot of it will just boil down to how well that tank duo will do. But the fact that they don't have the backups is a big reason of concern. So, it's just one of those teams. Like, are they a playing potential team? Yes. Will they be able to maybe turn the tides when it comes to their home stands? Like, maybe that's going to be where they're going to have their best results in that case. But I look at how the European talent has done in the Overwatch League across the board, and it's been pretty lackluster. So it's hard to kind of like see all of the positives, especially with the rookie perspective on that front.
Yeah, I think that they definitely have that and picking up some new tanks mid-season for just to propel them into the upper echelons of the over. But where they're at now, where they've got, I think that they definitely fall pretty damn close to being right in the middle, and I really look forward to seeing how they play, especially with the way last season went for them. This season should be a lot more Washington friendly.
Well, I guess the real question for me is how much do you feel like having 5 homestands propels this team in your rankings?
Um, Go ahead.
For me, I think it's huge. I think being in your hometown for that many weeks is a very big help for the team because you can really establish a home way better than any other team in the league, especially with Washington. I think Washington has like the height of that. But my main thing I was gonna bring up is like even if they have a questionable main tank and off tank, they still have Roar who can be consistent, although not the best main tank. I think he still be a consistent main tank that can help the team. So even though like the other two are big mysteries, I think Roar could really come in and at least give him a few wins. He's not like a Giannis, he's not just gonna like poop the season away. But other than that, I think homestands are actually going to be huge.
All right. Go ahead.
If you look at Washington's early schedule, in their first 5 games, they should have 3 super easy wins. In week 3, which they have a bye week 1, they play Paris, London. So I think that Washington should be able to get off to a pretty strong start, and that could really fuel them for the rest of the season as well.
Yeah, it seems like the first Looks like
They got
4 games are like kind of split. Like if we're talking about like where we have the teams ranked, so it should be an interesting start. Well, then Boston is like their 5th game, so
yes, they have like a 3-game run that's Paris, London, Boston. So that I look at that as like their confidence builder run at the beginning of the season, but then they get to go into New York after that. So I guess it gets a little tougher.
All right, so just a quick recap. We have 15th through 11th. For myself, I had the Mayhem, Defiant, Hunters, Outlaws, and Fuel. Nura, you had Hunters, Defiant, Outlaws, Fuel, and Justice. With Booger having Eternal, Fuel, Defiant, Hunters, and Justice. So quite a few of the same teams. Obviously, the biggest one, are at least differential between last week and this week, were the Justice at this point. But next week, we will be moving on to the next 5 blocks. So next week, we will be covering teams that we have in the upper half, starting at rank 10 and going through rank number 6 before we go into our top 5 episode before the Overwatch League kicks off. Now, on that note, guys, if you guys want to help us out, I do want to say, as always, the best thing to do for us as a podcast is to head over to iTunes and write us a review. Let us know how we're doing and let us know what you would like to see incorporated to the show. Obviously, our segments will be a little bit different once the Overwatch League is actually going on. We're obviously not going to be going through power ranks every week or anything like that. We'll have more tailored segments to, specific players, specific teams, maps, games, whatever. Obviously, things are going to change on that front. But let us know how we're doing. And if you want to find additional Overwatch-related content, of course, we have our podcast directory on our website. And then every Sunday, we do the weekly recall, which has a listing of all the prior week's podcast episodes. So, for all the latest, you can either find the link over on our Discord, or I tweet it out on Twitter at OW Recall. Now, of course, if you guys would like to support us further, you can do so a couple of different ways. You can, subscribe to us over on Twitch, whether it is through, Amazon Prime with Twitch Prime, or Tier 1 subs at $4.99. And then we have our Patreon, where we have tiers starting at just $1 a month. So for more info, check out our Patreon at patreon.com/OWL Network. So you too can join the likes of our master and above patrons of Blazin' Bob, Brendan, Jay-Z, Owl, Kesha, and Agent Life 23 in helping our network grow. So again, guys, thank you so much for all of your continued support. And Booger, of course, we have a number of different ways how our listeners can get a hold of us. So why don't you go ahead and let them know how they can do that?
Yeah, if you want to email contact at owlnshow.com. Our website is owlnshow.com, and you can find us on Twitter at owlnshow. All of these episodes go to YouTube at youtube.com/Overwatch League Network. We have a Discord that's discord.me/OWLN That's a very cool Discord to hang out in. It's where I go to try to find some duo partners for Overwatch. Then we're on Twitch at twitch.tv/OWLN show. We're a Twitch affiliate, and you can help support the show by subscribing. On Mondays, you got this show at 7 p.m. Overwatch League Network. And then on Tuesdays, you have Overwatch League by the Numbers, which is a fantasy Overwatch League show. And you have Soul Drink, the creator of High Noon Fantasy, guesting tomorrow. There's Heroes Never Die, which airs Wednesdays at 5 p.m. PT. And host streams are when available and run on a flex schedule, so be sure to follow and get notified. And then there's the Patreon at patreon.com/OWL Network.
Absolutely. And in regards to finding our host, Anura, I know you actually kind of rebranded. So where can they find you now on Twitter?
You can find me now at Anura OW on Twitter. I changed it because I didn't like underscores or numbers. So I think this was the lesser of two evils for me. I'm excited for the change.
Now, the real question is, what will the over-under be before you want to remove OW?
You cut out for me.
Yeah,
Oh, did I?
totally.
Yeah, you did.
Discord just be in Discord on that end, but I was wondering what the over/under would be for you wanting to remove the OW from your tag.
Oh, yeah, I want Anura, but I'm pretty sure it's some famous person be able to get it. Maybe Anura GG would probably be the one I'm really going for. That guy hasn't been active for like 5 or 7 years. I don't remember, but hopefully I can get that one eventually. But eventually I'll get rid of the OW. Mark my words.
Is that a threat or a promise? Maybe it's both.
Both.
Yeah.
I think it's both.
All right, well, Booger, where can our listeners get a hold of you on social media?
I'm on Twitter and Twitch at Booger Brains, and I would like to remove the brains at some point. It's Booger Brains, BOOGERBRAINZZ, 2 Z's. I've been doing quite a bit more on Twitch lately, and I've been working on getting that going. So check it out there. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, and as for myself, I, of course, am on Twitter at TumblydrunkCTR. Then I am streaming on Monday, Wednesday, Thursdays on my Twitch channel at twitch.tv/TumblydRunk, where you can see me just go aggro Lucio or just throw Coalescence as soon as I get it and push them back to spawn. All of that good stuff. So just as a reminder for this week, we do have, as Booker had mentioned, Soul Drink from High Noon Fantasy on OWL by the numbers tomorrow night. That'll be at 6 p.m. Pacific time. And we do have a game night coming up. That will be on Saturday, January 25th. So that will be next week. And, we'll probably do custom games, maybe some workshop stuff. So join us. I would imagine, we'll probably do it at, 7 p.m. Pacific time again. Maybe a little bit earlier, depending on if people log in earlier. So, if you hop on, I'm sure you'll find us in the game night lobby, and, maybe we'll get some customs going or just quick play until we are able to fill things up. But we hope to see you out there. And, of course, we will be streaming it on our Twitch channel as well. But with that being said, guys, I do want to thank you again for joining us here tonight on Overwatch League Network. This has been episode number 109. I've been your host, Tumbly Drunk, joined, as always, by my co-hosts, Anura and Booger. And we hope to see you guys back tomorrow night for OWL by the numbers. Take care and have a good night.